Hi, I'm Rick Dior, and welcome to episode 6 of Snare Drum of the Week. So today we have a legendary drum, the Sonor Ferro Manganese snare drum. It's hard to say manganese. I hope I'm saying it right. So this is a steel drum. Steel drums are a little more rare in the percussionist arsenal, but there's plenty of them out there. And this is probably the most famous of them all. Just a great drum. There were many versions of this drum, some really fancy, some not so much. This one, not so much. I like the simpler Sonar drums. Once they just made them like really heavy and like a tank, but that made the sound suffer somewhat, in my opinion. This is a light drum, it's pretty thin shelled. It's almost the equivalent, I think, of a student drum for the Sonar line, but like a lot of student drums, this drum sounds great. It's very bright. It's very poppy. It's a great jazz snare drum. It's just a good all-around drum, and they're not that expensive. These simple ones anyway. So we'll go through it. I took the hardware off because I wanted to give it a good cleaning. These shells will last forever. It's not like the Ludwig drums. A lot of those in the 70s would oxidize right away. These drums will not do that if you keep them clean and dry. So this drum's probably from the early 70s. It's got the old strainer that you see there. These strainers were prone to getting kind of clogged up, and I'll show you how to fix that in a minute. This top unscrewed so you could replace it, which is very handy. A lot of the other drums that had this kind of thing, they would just break off. And I keep this operating very smoothly, so I use this drum a lot. It's got the phonic lugs. Now some of these drums you'll see have different lugs, so it's just a different model. This particular model is the 454. It's a 5 by 14-inch drum. Like all the early Sonar tension rods, this is slotted. It uses a special key that's also slotted. So if you get one of these in the mail and it's got these slots, don't use a screwdriver. Just order a key, okay? Because you'll really scratch up the drum with that when it slips out of your hands. It's got an internal muffler, very cheap. I never used that. The snare adjustments are not done on the strainer, interestingly enough. They're done on the back, on the butt plate like that. And this, again, you got to keep this well oiled to keep it operating. Now, there's no serial number on this one. It's, I guess you call it a pre-serial number. And interestingly, the vent hole, there's no vent hole, but there is a hole by the strainer. I've got 3 of these things, and they all have the same hole, so I don't think it was for a different strainer, although I could be wrong, but there's no vent hole, so they kind of hid it there. All right, it's not very elegant, but that's the way it is. So it's a very simple drum. I have the original snares. You can change those out for anything you want. The originals work great, and I'll use those today. So I'm going to show you this drum with some different heads. The bottom head, though, will remain constant. It's going to be a very thin diplomat on the resonant side, the snare side. That's what I use on this drum, okay? The top, though, I'll go between a calf head and a diplomat coated. So we'll try it both ways. I'll put the diplomat coated on there first. I like thin heads on this particular drum. Now, you might say, well, how do you know it's steel? It's real easy. You can do the magnet test. If you do it on the outside, please put a piece of cloth under the magnet or you will dent the drum. All right, it's a very powerful magnet, so it just basically sticks there. All right, and we can put it inside without it. It's really powerful. Now, the lugs, though, are not magnetic, and we're going to do the same thing. So, nothing. So they could possibly be aluminum. They could probably brass, but they are not steel. But that's how you know you have a steel drum. So if I take a Ludwig drum, actually I'll grab this real quick. So this is this is the one I've been comparing them to. This is a chrome over brass and nothing there, okay? And also the Superphonics won't either because they're aluminum. So we'll compare these two. This is also a bright drum. You've been listening to this one a lot because I've been comparing the other drums against that, all right? So we'll put the heads on here and I'll show you how it sounds. I'll play it at the drum set like I've been doing. But yeah, great drum. I highly recommend them. And I like the simpler ones, not the big tanks. Now, those big ones are going to cost you a lot of bread. I had one. Of course, the The bell bronze or bell brass ones are the most expensive drums that you can buy. I have those as well. I love the piccolo. Not so fond of the bigger one, but they're worth a fortune. But these drums have a personality for sure, different than anything else. In a later video, I'll show you a Donat snare that I got recently that I really like. And that's also stainless steel, but it's engraved. It's gorgeous. Okay, so stand by and we'll show you this drum with some heads. Okay, so I put the Remo Diplomat on top of this Sonor drum. And on the bottom, like we talked about, we had the clear, very thin Diplomat. These are the heads that I like for this drum. And next to it, we have what we've been using for our metal drums as sort of the comparison. The Ludwig 1961 chrome over brass drum, very common drum. And also I might throw this this Gretsch 4160 that you heard in one of the earlier episodes in there, just for fun. So the normal tuning I use for this drum is an A on top and an F sharp on the bottom. These may vary just a little, especially the Gretsch. I tune that a little bit lower. So let's see what this sounds like. So what I'm getting here, and again, I have to always go in there and listen, but it's a very bright, crispy, snary kind of drum. Very bright. And that's sort of characteristic of these old Sonor steel drums. But not unpleasant, actually. It doesn't take your head off. Now, the big deep one, you could tune that a little bit higher, but it's a thicker sound if you want to get one of the 6.5s. But that'll cost you. Those are expensive. Now, if I didn't say before, it's got 8 lugs. So they did make a 10 lug version of this. I prefer the 8 lug. I've tried the 10 lug. I had it. I sold it. This drum, for me, does the trick for what I need it for. So I use this on recordings where I need a snare drum that will break through the mix. This is a very good rim shot. Now, I will normally never muffle this drum, so I don't have any muffling here right now, but I'll show you what that sounds like. I'll just put my finger on it here. I think when you muffle it, especially this drum, it takes all the character away from it. Now, it does have an internal muffler. I'll put that on. I normally don't use those. So I don't like internal mufflers because they press up against the head, and then when you play, the head wants to move down, and it fights that. So I wouldn't use those if I was here, but I'd never use them. But I leave it in there, and I just unscrew it, okay? Now, one characteristic of this drum you might not like, and I don't like, but it can be fixed, is the strainer can be very noisy when the snare's off, as you'll hear right now. So you hear that rattling? That's coming from the strainer it's just poorly designed, this early strainer. So the metal pushes up against. Now, you can fix it. I have fixed it before. I just haven't done it to this one. You take some moleskin and put it on that metal. Maybe I'll do a video where I show you how to do that. I don't know how many of you own these drums, but it's a problem on all of them. And again, like we talked about the Lightning strainer and some of these other strainers, I'm really picky about noise, like because I'm a recording engineer. So when the snares are off and I'm playing it on tom, if I'm doing, like timbale-like stuff, and I don't want to hear any rattling. So this strainer is notorious, the 454 old strainer, notorious for that. And they knew it too, and they actually dropped this strainer soon after, probably 78 or 9, something like that. Disappeared, it's gone. And all my other phonic drums don't use this strainer. They have a different strainer. So it was pretty cheap and all that. So that's the only thing. Now you can easily change the strainer out. I just wanted to show you exactly what the drum would sound like, besides the original heads, what it would sound like when you first got it. So it's got the strainer, the original snares, everything. And heads you would always change anyway, change them up. So yeah, great drum, great sound. The strainer is the thing. You can fix it by putting, some moleskin in there. Now, one thing that you can do, this strainer was notorious for kind of jamming up and getting clogged and the lever not working. There's this stuff called Lock Dry Lube that 3-in-1 makes. I don't work for them, but I love this stuff. Just when you do it, wear a mask because it's like silicone, I think, based. And you just spray that in there, and man, anything that's stuck or has that problem, don't use WD-40, that'll gum up. Or even oil. This is kind of dry, silicone based, so it will make anything smooth. And so if you have that problem with this strainer, that works great, okay? Now let's compare it to this Ludwig. So we'll play a little, and then I'll take this pad off. So a great rim shot on this Ludwig, as always. I've played this for you before. All right, very powerful drum. But they are very much different drums. I'll play them together. One thing you'll know about this Ludwig, if you have one, a chrome over brass, very dry. Brass is dry, where stainless steel or steel is going to be a lot more vibrant, almost ringing. The Ludwigs have a tendency to sound very aggressive. All right, this drum has a very sweet kind of sound to me. And it's such a joy to play it. It's got a lot of good feedback to it. It's very snary sounding. Most notably because of the strainer design. That actually works for it. But you can tighten this knob up. I'll play it for you tighter. All right, fun. Now, we're going to throw this Gretsch 4160 on here. And we played this for you recently. Oh, this drum's heavy. Oh, by the way, the Sonor drum, if I didn't say it, is very light. It's about 6 pounds, okay? So not much to it. And this Gretsch drum's 10 pounds, so we got 4 pounds in the shell. This is a heavy brass shell. So this drum's a little bit lower. we'll tighten the snares up like we did before, just a little bit. So very, very different drums. We'll play them on the drum set for you. I'll compare all 3 drums briefly for you. So here we are at the drum set, and we have this Sonor drum up first. And we'll try this with a low tuning, and then I'll tune it up high. One quick thing, some of you have asked about the sound. I'm using 289, a U89 overheads, and a Shure Beta 52 bass drum mic. This is a Shep's mic just for my voice. I don't use it in a recording. And over there, when I try out the snare drums, I'm just using a basically TLM 193, which is an old Neumann mic, and just one mic. So it might sound a little different from when I'm in front of the room versus the back of the room here, which is a little more live. And you're getting the benefit of these 2 overheads, and also the resonance of the drums, which ring along with the snare drum. So you're hearing all that ring, and that probably makes the drum, it does, sound a lot thicker, okay? So that's that explanation for you. And now we'll tune it up a little bit higher. Tune it up to like an A. So when you first put drum heads on, if those of you who don't know, they have a break-in period, normally about a week actually, until they sound their best. And these particular drum heads, the diplomats, are very, very thin. So they tend to stretch more than most other heads. So that's almost choked, so it's very high. So one of the great things about this drum is you can tighten it up quite a bit. It's still got a kind of a fat sound. Great drum. It's one of my favorites. And I know I say that a lot about most of the drums, but I wouldn't own them if they weren't my favorites. But this is a little bit different than almost anything. So before we put the calf head on this one, let's play the Ludwig for you so you can get a little comparison. I know a lot of you are probably really sick of this drum. But it is something to compare to if you go through all the videos, which is important. And it's a very well-known sound. Everybody knows the sound of the super. Now remember, we tightened this one up before, so we'll loosen it just a little. Okay, so you get a feel for that. And let's just put up the Gretsch up there. Put this right here. And again, we heard this one recently. So that's the Gretsch tuned very high. I cranked it up for a session the other day. Okay, so you do hear the similarity in the ring, though, of this. And again, watch that video about the Gretsch 4160. You'll hear several tunings and couple different drums. All right, we'll put this one back up here. Now, let's see here. So let's do a higher tuning on this. Oops. All right. And we'll bring it up pretty high here. I'm not a huge fan of the slotted tension rods. I'm not sure of the logic of that, just something to be different, but you gotta have a special key, which is a pain in the butt. They probably did this so they could sell you keys. Yeah, it's almost toy-like there. Okay, so we'll change this head to a calf head and you'll hear a completely different drum. We'll be right back. Okay, so I put this old earth tone calf head on here. This head is pretty thick, probably about between an emperor and an ambassador. Some of these heads are thick, but you want to do that so you don't break it. Now, it adds a darkness to this drum. And as all calf heads do, when you put them on pretty much right away, they go down. So let's tune it up a little more. And weather affects these things like crazy, so if you don't like messing with heads a lot, you probably want to stay away. It's definitely a different character though, a different feel. So this is what I would consider a higher tuning, pretty much the highest on this drum. So I love this drum with a calf head. So I use it on there pretty regularly. This or Diplomat. Those are my favorite heads. I've gone through lots of heads. One thing I do is I have literally hundreds of drum heads. And when I get a drum or I'm experimenting, which I love to do, especially before a session when I'm setting up, if I know, if the client has told me what they're looking for, they might send me some recordings. We want this kind of sound, that kind of sound. I can pretty much get any sound because I know these drums so well. And I have well over 100 snare drums, and some of them sound the same, but most of them are just a little different. And this is one of those drums that, like you heard over there, compared to the Ludwig and the Gretsch, is just a little bit different. It's a little brighter, but it's also warmer, if that makes any sense. And it's a great feeling drum too. So it's the 454 5x14 Sonor drum here. Okay, we'll just play a little, and we'll see you next time.